What's up guys, Mike from Rockville, and today we are talking about protect mode on your amplifier and the steps you should take to troubleshoot how to get your amp out of protect mode. Now protect mode is a feature that almost all amplifiers have. It's a mechanism that allows the amp to protect itself from getting seriously damaged. It's often signified by an LED on your amplifier that will light up when something causes your amp to go into protect mode. There are multiple reasons that can cause your amp to go into protect mode. We're going to look at those today as well as how to resolve them. Let's get started. So the first thing we always want to double check when we're troubleshooting anything regarding our amplifier is the power and ground wire. We want to make sure that our power and ground wire are not loose, which could cause intermittent connection and would force the amp into protect mode. The proper solution for this is to make sure your power and ground wire are firmly secure on both ends. First check the connection on your amp and make sure it's tight there, then check the other end. For the power wire, we want to make sure it's tightly fastened into the fuse that is then going to the positive terminal on our car's battery. For the ground wire, we want to make sure it's tightly fastened to exposed metal on the car's chassis. You want to make sure wherever you are putting your ground wire, all the paint has been scraped or sanded away so the ground wire is having a clean connection with the car's chassis. So after you've checked both the power and the ground wire and you're satisfied with the connection points, they're both really tight, we can begin the next part of troubleshooting. So the second thing you want to check when your amp goes into protect mode is to take your system and make sure it's compatible with itself. So you're going to take the model number of your subwoofers, the amount of subwoofers you're using, the model number of your amplifier, and you're going to check how you have all of this wired together, and we want to make sure we are properly matching the final impedance going from the subwoofers to our amplifier. For example, if I have two DVC 2 ohm subwoofers wired in parallel down to a 1/2 ohm load, and I have that going to a 2 ohm stable mono amplifier, the amp is going to be running extremely hot. So much heat will build up that the thermal protection will kick in. So if your amp is going into protect mode after playing music for a couple of minutes, like 10 minutes, this is likely the cause. The solution for this is to check our wiring and make sure our subwoofers are configured in a way where the final impedance is compatible with our amplifier. You can always double check this with a multimeter if you have it, and if you're unsure about how to wire, you can check the series of videos we have on that. Another thing you always want to double check with your amplifier is there enough ventilation to the amp? If you have it under the seat of a car, it might be building up heat because it's not properly ventilated, so you always want to check that your amp has enough ventilation to cool itself down. Another common reason that your amp might go into protect mode is if the positive and negative speaker wire that's running from your amp to your speakers touch each other, either at the speaker terminals or at the amp terminals. Now this can also happen if you have a subwoofer in an enclosure box and the speaker wires are touching each other in the enclosure box terminals. This is a very easy thing to fix. We just need to make sure that our speaker wires don't have any loose strands that could touch each other outside of the terminals. If you notice that any of your speaker wire strands were touching, once you twist them back into place, put them in the terminals, you should notice that your amp will go out of protect mode. Now the next issue is a very common DIY installer error, and it can be very dangerous for the system, and that's reverse polarity. Reverse polarity means your power and your ground wires are in the wrong place and essentially backwards. So you have your power wire going into your ground terminal and your ground wire going into your power terminal. So it's very easy to avoid this. Just always triple check your work after you've done an installation. Make sure the wire that's going from the positive terminal of your battery, the power wire, is going into the power terminal on your amplifier, and make sure the ground wire that's usually run in the trunk of your vehicle is going into the ground terminal on your amplifier. This is very important to check because this can lead to permanent failure of your system. Another thing that can cause your amp to go into protect mode is a blown speaker. An easy way to check this is to take a multimeter and check the impedance at each terminal on your speaker and make sure it's up to specs. But if you don't have a multimeter, another cool way that you can check if your speaker is blown is to take a 9-volt battery and test it. To test it with a 9-volt battery, you take a speaker wire, run it out of the positive terminal on your speaker to the positive terminal on your 9-volt battery, then you take another speaker wire, run it from the negative terminal on your speaker to the negative terminal on your 9-volt battery. If the subwoofer makes a pop sound and you notice the cone go up, then you know that that voice coil is good. If there's no movement on the subwoofer when you do this test, that subwoofer could potentially be blown, and using that sub in your system will put your amp in protect mode. Another wire you want to check to make sure it's working properly is the remote wire. If you connect the remote wire to the proper place on your amplifier but not on the proper place on your head unit or your receiver or off of one of your accessories, accessory wires, it could cause your amp to go into protect mode. So just like we did with our power and our ground wire, we want to make sure our remote wire is ran to the correct place on our head unit. A lot of times this is labeled on the wire harness coming out of the head unit, or if we're running into the accessory wire, we just want to make sure that the connection is good and that there's no intermittent connection. Another thing you'll definitely want to check if your amp is going into protect mode intermittently is the voltage of your car battery. Typically, a healthy car battery will show a voltage of 12.6, and in most cases, amps have an operating range of around 10 to 16 volts. This is completely amplifier specific, so make sure you check out the operating range on your amplifier. But some amplifiers have built-in low voltage protection and over voltage protection, which will send your amp into protect mode if the voltage drops or goes above the amp's operating range. The solution for this is pretty simple. You can test your car battery with the multimeter to make sure it's healthy and delivering a voltage that is within your amp's operating range. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is checking your power and your ground wire to make sure it's correctly suited for your setup. If the power and ground wire are not a thick enough gauge, the amp could go into protect mode to protect itself from unsafe signals. If you use too small of a gauge wire for the amplifier, the wire will get hot because it might be unable to carry the maximum current the amp needs. It also may burn up. A result of this would be a severe voltage drop at the amp terminals, which could cause the amp to go into protect mode intermittently. So you always want to make sure that your wires are to spec in terms of gauge with the rest of your system. And if you ever need a second opinion, you can always contact our customer support team here at Rockville. Hopefully this video helped you troubleshoot why your amp is in protect mode. As always, guys, I'm Mike from Rockville. I'll see you next time.